Welcome to the Relationships Decoding Podcast.
Okay, so this is going to sound kind of strange, but have you ever, gotten really fixated on something? Like maybe during a certain time in your life?
Yeah, I mean, who hasn't, right? We all have our little quirks.
Exactly. And I was reading this article the other day about these sort of repetitive behaviors, where you keep checking if the stove's off or washing your hands over and over again.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely been there with the stove checking, especially late at night.
Right. And for me, it was totally the hand washing thing. It was when I was pregnant, actually. I just felt like my hands were constantly dirty, and I must have washed them a million times a day. It's crazy.
And that's so interesting because it kind of ties into what we're diving into today, right? You sent over some really cool stuff about Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, or OCPD.
Yes, OCPD. And honestly, at the time, I just figured it was pregnancy anxiety, maybe a little bit of what people call OCD. But going through all this stuff you send over, articles, research notes, really helped me see the differences between OCPD and actual OCD.
For sure. And that's huge, right? Understanding those differences, because even though the names are similar, the experiences underneath are so different. It's like looking at two trees that kind of look the same from a distance, but up close, they're totally unique.
Exactly. And the sources you sent really break it down well. So basically, OCPD, it's all about this intense need for perfection. Everything has to be in its place, and there's this drives to control things, situations, people even. Whereas OCD is more about those intrusive thoughts, like unwanted images or urges, and the compulsions that people feel they have to do to deal with those thoughts.
Right. And another key difference is how people with each one see their own actions. So with OCPD, they genuinely believe that their way is the right way. It's not just a way to do something, it's the only logical way to do it.
Yeah. It's not like that feeling of I know this is crazy, but I can't stop. Which, from what I've read, that seems to be a big part of OCD. People with OCD, they often know their compulsions are too much or irrational, but they still feel like they have to do them. And the main feeling driving them is a lot of anxiety and fear about those intrusive thoughts.
Exactly. But with OCPD, it's less about fear and more like this constant tension, this worry that things aren't quite right, or that if things aren't done a very specific way, something bad will happen.
It's funny, reading all this about OCPD, I totally thought of my old boss, Laura. She was so talented, but a total workaholic. She'd be at the office until midnight, always had to be involved in every single detail because she thought only she could get it right. Back then, everyone was saying OCD this and OCD that, but now I'm realizing she was classic OCPD. That need for perfection and control was her whole thing.
It's wild how you can see these things in people right? It makes it so much more real than just a definition in a textbook, and it makes you wonder, what's going on in their heads? The stuff you sent had a really good section on the beliefs that drive OCPD.
It was so insightful. The first one was this belief that imperfection equals disaster. It goes way beyond just liking things to be neat. It's a deep conviction that if something isn't perfect, something bad will happen because of it.
And you see that play out in how they act, right? Like the example with Jacob spending hours tweaking fonts and spacing in a PowerPoint. He was convinced that only I can make this perfect. That belief in their own standards can make it really hard for them to trust others to get things done right.
And it's not just about those big important things either. It's also about everyday stuff. The second belief was about rules being essential for security. It's having these strict rules, even if they make them up themselves, makes them feel safe and in control because the world can feel so unpredictable otherwise. They gave this example of Sarah, who had this whole system for washing dishes, plates, then bowls, then pans, and she was sure that doing it any other way would lead to total chaos. It's these rules control even the little things.
Yeah, and the rules might not make sense to anyone else, but they're super important to the person with OCPD because it gives them this feeling of order. And then there's this third belief that relaxing is actually dangerous. They can't waste any time not being productive, or they'll fall behind or lose control.
Oh my gosh, that one hit home. They have this example of David on vacation stressing out because he wasn't reading some work-related book so he wouldn't fall behind. Guy's on vacation. It's this pressure to always be doing something, always be improving. If they're not, they're going to miss out or something bad will happen.
Exactly. And the fourth big belief is this idea that emotions equal weakness. And that can be really tough because it can make people with OCPD feel so isolated. Like the example of Linda, who buried herself in work to avoid feeling lonely. She'd tell herself, if I stay calm and in control, it means I'm competent. It's like they push down all those vulnerable feelings to seem strong. So it's not just about liking things a certain way, it's deeper than that. It's about this fear of anything less than perfect, this need for rules to feel safe, this anxiety about relaxing, and this hiding of emotions.
It sounds so exhausting, like they're always on edge. And obviously all this stuff going on inside, it's got to affect how they interact with people too.
Well, absolutely. That constant push for perfection, it can make them really inefficient. Like, think about your boss, Laura. All that micromanaging probably slowed everyone down in the end, and it definitely causes problems in relationships.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because they want to control everything, and everyone has to follow their rules. The article talked about how people with OCPD can seem super critical or judgmental, or even like they don't care about others because they expect everyone to be just as perfect as they are.
Yeah.
It's like they're constantly thinking, why can't you just do it the right way? My way.
And it's interesting because on one hand, they seem super disciplined and in control, but underneath, there's this huge fear of failure. Remember that example about someone saying, you couldn't even handle this small task? The sources said that kind of criticism can really crush someone with OCPD. Any mistake they make or anyone else makes it feels like a direct attack on their whole sense of worth.
It's like they built this perfect image of themselves and they're terrified of it cracking. So where does all this come from?
The sources had some fascinating stuff on the causes of OCPD. They talked about neurological things first. Yeah. And keep in mind, this is all still being researched, but what they're finding is pretty cool. So for people with OCPD, the parts of the brain that handle stress and making decisions, they seem to be more sensitive, which means they might need more control to handle all that extra alertness. Like, there might be differences in the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, which are key for all that stuff.
So it makes sense that if you're always feeling stressed, you want to control everything around you to feel better. And then the sources talked a lot about family environment.
That's a big one. Like, if your parents were super controlling or strict, it can teach you that being disciplined and following the rules is the only way to be loved or avoid being criticized. Like, they had this example of Tom who got punished really harshly for not putting his toys away. Stuff like that can make you believe that following rules is the only way to stay safe. Your early experiences really shape how you see the world.
It's like they learn that they have to be perfect to be loved.
Yeah.
The sources also talked about how culture can play a role too, which I thought was interesting.
Definitely. Like, in some cultures that value achievement and conformity and respecting authority, some of those OCPD traits might actually be encouraged. Same thing with like really competitive schools or strict religious groups where there's a lot of emphasis on following rules and being the best. It's like the whole environment reinforces those tendencies.
Like those perfectionistic tendencies are seen as good things. And then they talked about how being a teenager is a big factor too.
Huge. That's when you're figuring out who you are. So if you're already someone who likes order and doing things right, and then you get praised for it, good grades, awards, people telling you you're responsible, all that positive reinforcement can make those perfectionist tendencies a core part of who you are. A good trait can become less flexible and less healthy if it's taken too far.
It's like it becomes less about being good at something and more about never being good enough. So if you're listening to all this and you're thinking, wait a minute, this sounds like me, what can you do about it? The sources had some really practical self-help tips.
The first thing, which is always the hardest, is just realizing that you have these patterns. Like, they suggested asking yourself, does this really need to be perfect? Anytime you feel that urge to make something flawless, it helps you question those thoughts and where they come from. And remembering to be kind to yourself. These patterns, they're not easy to change, and beating yourself up about it won't help.
I really like the idea of embracing good enough. I know that probably sounds crazy to someone with OCPD, but they said to start small, like pick a task and intentionally stop when it's about 70% done, just to see if the world actually ends. That could really help challenge that belief that any imperfection will lead to disaster. And if you're a manager and you see these traits in yourself, they said to try delegating more. Learning to trust other people to do things can be huge for letting go of that need to control every little detail. Imagine what you could do with all the time and energy you'd save by letting go of that last 30% of perfection.
Totally. It's about testing those fears, right? And they also talked about emotional regulation training, because anxiety seems to be a big part of OCPD. Things like mindfulness or breathing exercises can really help. Even doing something unstructured, like just doodling or taking a walk without a destination, those can be great ways to challenge that feeling that you always have to be productive. It's like saying to yourself, this time is mine and I can do whatever I want with it.
And the tips for relationships, those are super important because, as we said, OCPD can really strain those connections. Things like saying, I feel, instead of blaming or accusing can make a huge difference in how you communicate. And realizing that other people's ways of doing things aren't wrong, just different. That can be a game changer.
It's about shifting away from that my way or the highway thinking and being more open and understanding. And it's not all on the person with OCPD to change. Their families and society as a whole can help too.
Yeah. Families can make a big difference by not putting so much pressure on kids to be perfect and letting them mess up without making a big deal out of it. Letting kids learn from their mistakes without being judged can help them see that messing up isn't the end of the world.
And schools can focus more on the process of learning, not just the end result. Teachers can help kids with OCPD to try different ways of doing things, to see that there's not always just one right answer and one right way to get there. Flexibility is a good thing.
It's about creating a space where it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them. But sometimes those self-help tips aren't enough, right? When is it time to think about getting professional help?
That's so important. If OCPD is making your life really hard, if it's messing up your work or your relationships or just making you miserable, it's definitely time to talk to a professional. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, that's been shown to be really effective for helping people identify and change those rigid thought patterns that drive OCPD. And group therapy can be great too because it gives you a safe place to practice letting go of control and being more spontaneous around other people.
So basically what we've learned is that OCPD, it's not just about being organized or liking things a certain way. It's often a way of dealing with deeper feelings of anxiety and insecurity. And whether you're dealing with it yourself or trying to support someone who is the key is to remember those underlying feelings, to be okay with things being good enough, and to try to be more flexible in how you approach life.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between aiming high and accepting that nothing's ever going to be completely perfect, and realizing that being vulnerable and flexible, those aren't weaknesses. They can actually be strengths that help you live a happier life with less anxiety.
That's such a great takeaway. It really changes how you see the whole thing. Now, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to think about. This idea of good enough. Is there somewhere in your own life or in how you interact with others where you might be pushing for absolute perfection when it might not actually be helpful? What could happen if you tried embracing good enough in that area? It's worth considering, don't you think?
Oh, sure. Food for thought.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time.